Sure about that. It was on VHS. It's never been released anywhere. It's never screened because no prints existed. And when Christina, who's here at the Nighthawk, filmed this print, she was told that this print was old and had no subtitles. So we made new subtitles, but then here it turns out it has subtitles. So it's got subtitles. It's still old. The movie you're about to see is important for three reasons, or there's three reasons to care about it. It's a fun action movie, but three people in this make it a really something different. The first is the two stars. On the one hand, you've got Shin Soo-ho, who is playing a little gang member street tough in this movie. I don't know how they translate his name in the subtitles, but the VHS, they translate it Spitfire, but you'll see him. He's in a triad, the Hong Kong equivalent of street gangs, and he's very easy to find. Shin Soo-ho was a really great stuntman, stunt actor. He was in a ton of movies, but he also became this sort of breakout B-list male action hero in a bunch of movies like the Mr. Vampire series. Against him is a guy who became much, much more famous, named who's playing the rich kid in this movie, who we're introduced to in one of the only slow-motion judo, wall-to-wall karate fights I've ever seen in my life. This is Nai Singh, who's better known as Colin Chu. He was a bad guy in a ton of movies with Jet Li, but he's best well known in the States for being in The Matrix 2 and 3 as Seraph, which was a role Jet Li was supposed to play. Nai Singh had fought Jet Li in a bunch of movies. They figured we can't get Jet Li, we'll get his on-screen opponent. So these two guys, this is one of the few movies in which they got to play good guys together. One of the few movies that they got to play good guys or even lead roles, and they are both martial arts beasts. However, the name that makes this movie so special is that this movie was hailed when it came out as the first Category 3 is like Hong Kong's NC-17, the first Category 3 movie from Sammo Hung. So, Sammo Hung is Jackie Chan's big brother from Chinese opera school. He is probably one of the greatest action directors and action on-screen fighters ever. He and his stunt team did the action for this movie. He produced this movie. He developed the script for this movie. So this is a Sammo Hung production. Now, the reason it was rated Category 3 is if you could get a 3 in Hong Kong if you were extremely violent, like really, really violent. Yeah, maybe. Also, if you had a lot of sex in the movie, you would get a Category 3. But weirdly, the third reason you get a Category 3 is language. So, too much cursing or too much triad language, which is sort of like the street level criminal talk, because the cops in Hong Kong regarded that as subversive. Too much of that got you a Category 3. And this movie is wall-to-wall triad language and profanity, which weirdly is not translated into the subtitles, which is why we got new ones, so you're not seeing those. However, Cantonese slang and profanity is one of the wonders of the world. It is some of the most inventive, amazing shit you'll ever hear in your life. So, whenever you see a subtitle, imagine it's 10 times dirtier and 10 times more profane and 10 times more insulting, and often talks about your piss being on fire. So, the other reason this movie is a big deal is this movie is, and this is one thing to say, this is an older print. This print is from 1989 when the movie came out in November of '89. So this movie, this is the print. This is the one that was out there. So it's going to be a little banged up in places. That's okay. It's fine. We'll all survive together. But the reason 1989 is really important to this movie is because of Hong Kong's political situation in 1989, which is all over this film. So everyone talks about 1997, 1997, 1997. Who cares when Hong Kong went back to China? No one in Hong Kong cared about 97. The two dates in Hong Kong that really matter is 1984, which is when the British signed the treaty with Hong Kong to return Hong Kong to, signed the treaty with China to return Hong Kong to China in 1997. And that completely sold out Hong Kong. They suddenly found out if you're a Hong Konger, you don't get a British passport. China's going to be in charge. China will be making the laws. And they have basically a few years to get their shit together. And so suddenly, everyone in Hong Kong freaked out in '84. If you could get overseas, if you had the money, if you had the connections, you got a foreign passport. If you could secure like a nest egg in another country, you did that. And there was this feeling in the '80s in Hong Kong as 50,000 people left Hong Kong a year looking for a more stable environment. There was this feeling that everything was up for grabs, the law didn't matter, all that mattered is what you could grab for you. You needed to take care of yourself. The police became more corrupt, corruption was endemic, it got really bad. And then came the second date. So this movie came out at the end of '89. The other big date was June 1st, 1989, which was the Tiananmen Square massacre. And that turned it all up to 11 when Hong Kongers realized we might be a place where tanks are going to roll. And so this already boiling fear of 97 coming up turned into a hysteria. This is all over this movie. Now, this movie, I think, was shot sort of earlier on. It was probably in the planning before the Tiananmen Square massacre. But you can see it all over the subtitles. I mean, people are constantly giving Chairman Mao quotes in this about democracy coming from the barrel of a gun, about how there's two different classes of citizens. And it's a movie in which the police are just another gang carving up the city, just as corrupt as the gangs who carved up the other side of the city. So, one last person I want to talk to, because you're going to see a ton of people, if you've seen Hong Kong movies, stuntmen, character actors, they all work for Sammo Hung. They're all over this. Lowell Low does the soundtrack. He was an actor who is rocking out. His little head's going to explode. He's rocking so hard in this. He did the soundtracks for movies like John Woo's The Killer. He was a really big deal. And so he did the soundtrack for this. But there is another person in this movie that I really care about, and that is Chan Wing-chi. She is the female lead in this movie. Now, Chan Wing-chi would go on after this to be in a few more low-budget action films, and then basically become an adult movie star. But in this, she is giving a performance as the street tough's girlfriend that is so much better than it needs to be. And it reminds me of why this movie exists and why I've always thought this movie was really special. So, this movie's going to give you tonal whiplash. There are scenes of goofy comedy next to scenes of incredibly brutal violence. Sometimes they're happening at the exact same time. But the one thing this movie keeps its eye on all the way through, from start to finish, is the fact that Hong Kong is divided into factions. You've got the cops getting rich and lining their pockets over here. You've got over here, you've got the criminals doing the same thing. Then you've got the rich people who are just getting out and leaving the normal Hong Kong folks behind. And in the middle, you've got the normal Hong Kong folks like Chan Wing-chi and Chin Siu-ho, her boyfriend in this movie. And these are just people who have nothing. This gap between them and the upper classes is enormous. They have a worthless Hong Kong passport. They don't have a lot of savings. They are at the mercy of any political force that comes along. All they want to do is hang on to what they've got and get through the night. So, ladies and gentlemen, a movie that I think is incredibly, incredibly great. A B-grade Hong Kong action movie that has been totally forgotten for reasons that are mystifying to me, covered in some of the greatest hard-rockin' 80s guitar you're ever going to hear in your life, and padded up with slow motion that makes it seem like a training montage out of Rocky. It is a movie that I think more people should see. Welcome to 1989's Into the Fire!